Thank you. Thank you very much to the people of North Star for this award. It's a little bit overwhelming. If you had told me 18 years ago that I would be getting an award in front of my parents for dropping out of high school, I would have insisted that you share whatever hallucinogenic drugs you are on. So some background is probably needed here. I have the honor for working for AFSC. My job description is a blessed one. I work to push back on what I believe are the broken and dangerous systems of our society, from a draconian immigration system to opposing nuclear weapons and power to the wars abroad that have gone on for more than a decade. I also regularly visit local high schools to try to counter the recruitment of youth for military service. It is this brokenness of our educational system and the problems with compulsory education that caused me to drop out of school, but more on that in a moment. At the end of 11th grade at Waltham High School, I dropped out. I was tired of school, I had read enough to know better, and I knew several people who demonstrated that leaving high school might not ruin one's life forever, as it had been suggested to me. I loosely attended an underfunded alternative school, essentially a poor man's version of North Star, for about 8 months while working part-time for a small online company. I decided that living in my parents' house was not a viable long-term solution, and I applied and was accepted into Boston University, as it was the only way that I could trick my parents for paying for me to move out of the house. So after a couple of years, I dropped out of BU, and I went on to work full-time at a software company where I was interning. After several years, when the company was bought out, I decided to go back to college to finish that elusive degree. So I went to UMass Amherst, and I graduated for the first time. Thank you. Hold on, there's more. I was on a roll, so I entered graduate school, but after a year and a half of that, I dropped out of that. So I stand before you, a 3-time dropout. The challenge is on, North Star. Next year, y'all gotta find somebody who's dropped out 4 times. I recently visited North Star during an open house, and I heard from a few of the current students. The stories they recounted were so familiar, and that familiarity was something that I hadn't felt in a very long time, about 17 years, in fact. My visit made me feel envious as well. I envied those people who now have North Star as a resource available to them, and a little jealous that they have a much clearer and well-supported alternative to school. Frankly, I dropped out of school because going to school, compulsory school, is a damaging endeavor for some, maybe most, and it can be damaging to the people who participate as both students and teachers. For parents who try to mitigate the situation, it is awkward to say the least and just as damaging at the most. It's based upon a system of production that does not benefit the people who produce. It's an old system. The way school that operated when I was there is the same way that it operated 50 years ago, so it's an antiquated system. It's a system that wears out its participants. And so needless to say, when I left school, I was thoroughly worn out. I was worn out for a few reasons. I have to say, the biggest was just dragging my teenage butt out of bed every morning and going to school so groggy. My mother can attest to waking me up repeatedly every morning. Almost all of my memories of school exist within this haze of physical exhaustion. I had help leaving school, however. As a teenager, I worked in the local public library, and I attended a weekend program for high school students at MIT. So I had books and I had resources available to me. Those resources, that help was largely through the authors Jonathan Kozol, Grace Llewellyn, and John Taylor Gatto. Gatto's Dumbing Us Down was a revolutionary book for me. It was revolutionary in that it simply pointed out things that were common sense, which is something so uncommon we should start calling it something else. I dropped out of school because it just doesn't work, at least not for some people. Have you ever tried to learn Latin in 40-minute segments? Or chess? Or anything worth learning? I have, and it was excruciatingly frustrating, and I actually did well in my schoolwork. Common sense tells us that the act of learning is not something that can be easily boxed into identically spaced time periods. I feel, in general, that our world, our society, needs less systems of authority and less systems of control, not more. I remember once missing a test because I thought I was supposed to be in orchestra. The teacher refused to let me back into the classroom to take the test, and as a result of missing it, I couldn't get better than a B in her class for that whole year. But the thing that I recall so vividly is her bitterness, her anger about having her authority challenged. It affected her profoundly. And then there was the teacher who sobbed in front of the class when she felt she lost control. And the history teacher, who was so tightly wound, we used to wonder how he managed to not have a heart attack until he had a heart attack. I remember these people vividly, and I remember thinking that there was something about that place that engendered such a bitterness and frailty not only in its students, but in its teachers too. For me, school was not a place that prioritized maturity, compassion, and certainly not learning. So thankfully there was North Star, and thankfully there are young people who have the courage to reject schooling. There were likely many criticisms of North Star. I saw doubt in the faces of some of the parents who visited during open house. It's not a perfect place. It's not a paradise where every student leaves to become a Harvard scholar. Students who reject school face an uncertainty about their future, about how they'll shape their lives in a very unorthodox fashion, at least in the short term. Facing that uncertainty is scary, can be scary, but facing it also engenders maturity, a maturity that only comes with breathing free. North Star is, I think, in part a detox center, to get this system of control out of our bones and out of our minds. It is a place to do, among other things, nothing. Just nothing. Because once you've grown regimented for so long, since you were a small child, it takes a while to get that out of your system. But eventually, you learn how to once again breathe freely. I am fortunate enough to have worked with 3 alums of North Star. Mishy Lieblum and I met while we were at UMass. She was a fellow undergrad. We were both non-traditional students. And we raised a bit of hell in student government and political organizing. We both went on to grad school at UMass into labor studies. I dropped out, but she graduated, and she's continuing to raise hell, organizing hotel workers with the labor union Unite Here. The other North Star alum I know is Emily Odgers, who interned with AFSC. At 15, Emily was the youngest Human Rights Commissioner in Northampton, and it was the youngest intern in my office. She was also one of the most mature and politically astute people that I've ever encountered in my time at AFSC. For example, her fury at having an enormous military contractor take root in her home city of Northampton translated into a tangible, practical good, a well-researched report that we released when Medea Benjamin, an international activist and co-founder of Code Pink, came to town. That report that she co-authored has been read by hundreds of people in Western Massachusetts. I've just found out recently that Marcella Jane, who has worked with the coalition Springfield No One Leaves, is an alum of North Star. Marcella's work has consisted of helping folks stave off foreclosure and eviction during the financial crisis. She did this as a mother and a college student to boot, so that should give you a sense of the extraordinary character of people who have been involved with North Star. The common thread that runs through Mishy, Emily, and Marcella's personality, and I imagine other North Star graduates, and hopefully myself, is a refusal to allow the status quo to go unchanged. I do know that these 3 women are mature beyond their years, and they possess a sense of groundedness that I find missing in many adults. They are a force for change, with a solid grasp of the feasible and the reasonable, which makes them some of my favorite people. So praise North Star. I think many folks view it as an alternative or a cure. I view North Star as a revolutionary institution. Any institution that breaks the continuation of the status quo is to be celebrated. North Star is where we detox, it's where we remove the shackles of regimentation, and we begin taking in those free breaths. And no matter what we do afterwards, no matter what we work for, we do it as children who found a better way to learn and live. So praise North Star, and thank you so very much for this day.